I was leaving a goodbye gift on my ex-boyfriend Marcus's porch before his military deployment when I noticed a strange car in the driveway. 2 days later, I received a furious letter from his mother calling me horrible names for trying to cause problems for her son and his new wife. That's how I found out Marcus had been secretly married while reconnecting with me for months. Before I dive into this story of military deception and the revenge that exposed a cheating husband's double life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever discovered someone was living a complete lie, and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of justice served cold. My name is Ashley, I'm 26 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I knew the difference between an honest reconciliation and elaborate deception. This story begins with what seemed like a second chance at love and ends with exposing a married man's calculated betrayal of two women. Marcus and I dated for about 8 months during my senior year of college. He was in the Army, stationed at a nearby base, and we had what I thought was a genuine connection. He was charming, funny, and seemed completely devoted to our relationship during the time we were together. Our relationship ended when Marcus received orders for additional training that would keep him away for several months, followed by an overseas deployment. The distance and uncertainty of military life put strain on our relationship, and we mutually agreed to break up rather than try to maintain a long-distance relationship with such an unclear timeline. The breakup was amicable. We both acknowledged that the timing wasn't right, but there were no hard feelings between us. Marcus said he hoped we could reconnect someday when his military obligations allowed for more stability. For about a year and a half, we had minimal contact. I graduated from college, started my career as a graphic designer, and began building my adult life. Marcus was busy with his military training and preparation for deployment. Occasionally, we'd exchange brief messages on birthdays or holidays, but nothing substantial. Everything changed about 4 months before Marcus's scheduled deployment overseas. He reached out with a simple message asking how I was doing and mentioning that he'd been thinking about me as his deployment date approached. "I know things ended between us because of military timing," he wrote in his first email. "But I keep thinking about what we had and wondering if we made a mistake letting that go." I was surprised but pleased to hear from him. Our relationship had ended on good terms, and I'd always wondered what might have happened if circumstances had been different. "I've been thinking about you too," I replied honestly. "How are you handling the upcoming deployment?" What started as a casual reconnection quickly became something more intense. Marcus called me regularly, sometimes multiple times per week, and we'd talk for hours about everything: our past relationship, what we'd been doing since the breakup, our hopes for the future. "I realize now that what we had was special," he told me during one of our long phone conversations. "I've been through other relationships since we broke up, but nothing compared to what I felt with you." Conversations became increasingly romantic and intimate. Marcus would tell me he missed me, that he thought about me constantly, and that he regretted letting military obligations end our relationship. "When I get back from deployment, I want to try again," he said one evening. "I want to see if we can build something real together, something that can survive the challenges of military life." I found myself falling for him all over again. The Marcus I was talking to seemed more mature, more certain about what he wanted, and completely focused on the possibility of us rebuilding our relationship. We exchanged emails almost daily, sent text messages throughout the day, and had lengthy phone conversations several times per week. Tone of our communications was definitely romantic. We were flirting, sharing intimate thoughts, and making plans for when he returned from deployment. "I can't wait to see you before I leave," Marcus said during one of our calls. "Even if it's just for a few hours, I need to see your face and hold you before I go overseas for a year." For 3 months, this pattern continued. Marcus would call me in the evenings, email me during his lunch breaks, and send text messages whenever he had free time. He talked about missing me, about regretting our breakup, and about wanting to be together when he returned. "You're the one person I can be completely honest with," he told me repeatedly. "Talking to you is the highlight of my day." I began to believe that we were genuinely reconnecting and that this time might be different. Marcus seemed more serious about our relationship and more committed to making it work despite the challenges of military life. As his deployment date approached, Marcus became even more romantic and sentimental in his communications. "I need to see you before I leave," he said during one of our final phone calls. "This deployment is going to be difficult, but knowing you'll be here waiting for me when I get back makes it bearable." We made plans for me to visit him the day before his deployment, but those plans fell through due to last-minute military obligations. Instead, I decided to stop by his house to leave a small goodbye gift and a note wishing him safety during his deployment. Marcus lived with his mother in a modest 2-story house about 30 minutes from my apartment. I'd been there many times during our original relationship, though his mother, Patricia, had never particularly liked me. She'd always been polite but distant, and I got the impression she thought I was a distraction from Marcus's military career. On the afternoon I decided to visit, I drove to Marcus's house with a small care package, some of his favorite snacks, a book I thought he'd enjoy, and a heartfelt note expressing my feelings about our reconnection and my hopes for his safe return. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked there. It was a newer sedan with out-of-state license plates. I assumed it belonged to one of Patricia's friends or maybe a relative visiting before Marcus's deployment. The house appeared empty, no lights on, no activity visible through the windows. I decided to leave my gift on the front porch with the note, figuring Marcus would find it when he returned home. I placed the care package by the front door, secured the note under a small weight so it wouldn't blow away, and left without seeing anyone. The visit took less than 5 minutes, and I didn't think much about the unfamiliar car or the quiet house. 2 days later, I received an envelope in my mailbox with no return address, just my name written in unfamiliar handwriting across the front. Inside was a handwritten letter from Patricia, Marcus's mother. The tone was immediately hostile and accusatory. "Ashley," the letter began, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to stop trying to cause problems for Marcus and his new wife." I read that sentence 3 times before the meaning sank in. New wife? What new wife? The letter continued with increasingly harsh language, accusing me of trying to break up a marriage and interfere with Marcus's new family. Patricia claimed that I was being disrespectful and inappropriate by leaving gifts and notes for a married man. "Marcus has moved on with his life," the letter stated. "He's married now and starting a family with someone who actually supports his military career. Your attempts to insert yourself into his life are unwelcome and disturbing." The letter concluded with Patricia demanding that I stop all contact with Marcus and respect his marriage and his wife's feelings. I sat in my living room holding this letter, trying to process what I'd just learned. Marcus was married? When had he gotten married? Who was his wife? How was this possible when we'd been reconnecting romantically for months? I reviewed every conversation, email, and text message Marcus and I had exchanged over the past few months. Not once had he mentioned being in a relationship with someone else, let alone being married. He'd talked about missing me, wanting to be together, and planning our future after his deployment. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had been cheating on his new wife with me, and I'd been completely unaware that she even existed. I felt sick, betrayed, and incredibly foolish. For months, I'd been falling in love again with a man who was living a double life, conducting an emotional affair while married to someone else. But I also felt angry on behalf of his wife, whoever she was. She deserved to know what kind of man she'd married and what he'd been doing behind her back. I decided that if Marcus's wife didn't know about his deception, she had a right to find out. No woman should be unaware that her husband was pursuing another woman while claiming to love and miss her. I spent the next day gathering evidence of Marcus's betrayal. I printed out every email he'd sent me over the past few months, compiled screenshots of text messages, and created a record of phone calls we'd exchanged. The evidence was extensive and damning. Email after email showed Marcus expressing romantic feelings, talking about our future together, and never once mentioning a wife or any other relationship. In one email from just 2 weeks before his deployment, Marcus had written, "I can't stop thinking about what it will be like when we're together again. You're the only person I've ever felt this connected to." Another message from a month earlier read, I know we broke up because of military complications, but I realize now that I never stopped loving you. I want to try again when I get back. Text messages showed him calling me pet names, sending romantic thoughts throughout the day, and talking about missing me constantly. Phone records from my cellular bill documented hours of calls between us, often late at night or early in the morning, times when his wife would presumably be asleep or unaware. But I still didn't know his wife's name or how to contact her. I remembered the unfamiliar car in the driveway and decided to drive by Marcus's house to see if I could gather more information. When I drove past the house the next day, the same car was still parked in the driveway. This time, I noticed something I'd missed during my first visit: a "Just Married" sign in the rear window of the car, along with ribbons and decorative cans tied to the bumper. The car belonged to newlyweds, and given that it was parked at Marcus's house, it had to belong to his new wife. They weren't just married, they were recently married, possibly while Marcus and I had been reconnecting. I also noticed that the car had luggage racks and wedding-related decorations that suggested they might have recently returned from a honeymoon trip. The timeline was becoming clearer. Marcus had gotten married, possibly quite recently, and his new wife was living at his mother's house with him before his deployment. Meanwhile, he'd been carrying on an emotional affair with me, planning our future together while apparently just having started a marriage with someone else. Since I didn't know his wife's name and couldn't contact her directly, I decided to send letters to Marcus's mother's address, where both Marcus and his new wife appeared to be living. I wrote 3 separate letters, each targeting a different recipient but all containing evidence of Marcus's betrayal. The first letter was addressed to Marcus's wife, since I didn't know her actual name. In this letter, I explained the entire situation from my perspective. "I don't know your name, but I believe you have a right to know what your husband has been doing," I began. "For the past 4 months, Marcus has been in regular contact with me, his ex-girlfriend, conducting what I now realize was an emotional affair." I included copies of emails where Marcus expressed romantic feelings, talked about our future together, and never once mentioned being married or in another relationship. I provided phone records showing the frequency and duration of our calls, many of which occurred at times when his wife would likely be at home with him. I had no idea Marcus was married until I received a hostile letter from his mother, I explained. "He led me to believe he was single and interested in reconciling our relationship. I'm as shocked as you probably are to learn about his deception." I concluded the letter by apologizing for unknowingly participating in his betrayal and expressing my belief that she deserved to know the truth about her husband's behavior. The second letter was addressed to Patricia, Marcus's mother. This letter had a different tone, focusing on her own hypocrisy and the chaos she would now have to deal with in her own home. "Patricia," I wrote, "your letter accused me of trying to cause problems for Marcus and his wife. What you apparently don't realize is that your son has been lying to both of us." I explained how Marcus had initiated contact with me, pursued me romantically for months, and never mentioned being married. I included examples of his deceptive communications and evidence of his emotional affair. "You accused me of being inappropriate, but your son is the one who chose to pursue his ex-girlfriend while married," I continued. "Since you were so concerned about his marriage, I thought you should know exactly what kind of husband he's been." I ended the letter by noting that his wife now knew the complete truth about Marcus's behavior, thanks to the evidence I'd provided her. The third communication was for Marcus himself. Since I remembered that he'd previously used my laptop and might still have access to my email accounts, I decided to send him a simple but ominous message. I logged into an old email account that I rarely used and sent Marcus a single line: "You're dead to me." I wanted him to wonder what I knew and what I might do with that information. Let him worry about the consequences of his actions for once. I mailed the letters to his mother's address on a Friday, ensuring they would arrive while Marcus was still at home before his deployment. I wanted his wife and mother to confront him directly rather than allowing him to leave for overseas duty without facing the consequences of his deception. For the next several days, I checked my old email accounts to see if Marcus had responded to my message. I was curious about how he would react to being caught in his lies. What I discovered was even better than I'd hoped for. Marcus had indeed retained access to one of my old email accounts, and I could see messages in his inbox that revealed the aftermath of my letters. His wife, whose name I learned was Jennifer, had clearly received and read my letter. She'd sent Marcus a series of increasingly angry emails demanding explanations for his behavior. "How could you do this to me?" read one message. "We've been married for 3 months, and you were talking to your ex-girlfriend about getting back together? During our honeymoon, you told me you needed to go get ice, and you were actually calling her?" Another email from Jennifer was even more devastating. "I read every single email you sent her. You told her you never stopped loving her. You made plans for your future together. What kind of marriage did I think I was getting into?" The phone records I'd provided had apparently revealed that Marcus had called me several times during their honeymoon trip, using excuses like running errands to step away from his new wife and contact me. Marcus's mother had also confronted him, and her email was filled with frustration and anger. "Marcus, I am furious with you," Patricia wrote. "Now I have to deal with your wife crying and having breakdowns in my house because you couldn't keep your lies straight. Jennifer is devastated, and I don't blame her." Patricia's message continued. "You made me look like a fool by making me write that letter to Ashley when you were the one who had been lying to everyone. Your wife is talking about getting the marriage annulled, and honestly, I don't blame her." Marcus tried to respond with explanations and apologies, but his emails were desperate and unconvincing. "It wasn't what it looked like," he wrote to Jennifer. "Ashley and I were just friends catching up. I was trying to let her down easy before my deployment, but the evidence I'd provided made his denials impossible to believe. The romantic tone of his emails, the frequency of contact, and his complete failure to mention his marriage painted a clear picture of intentional deception." "You told her you wanted to be together when you got back from deployment," Jennifer replied. "You called her the highlight of your day. That doesn't sound like letting someone down easy." Marcus's mother was equally unsympathetic to his excuses. "Don't try to lie your way out of this," Patricia wrote. "I read the emails Ashley sent. You were having an affair, emotional or otherwise, and you got caught. Now your wife and I have to deal with the mess you created." The email exchanges continued for several days, with Marcus becoming increasingly desperate as he realized his deployment date was approaching and he was leaving behind a marriage in crisis and a family situation in chaos. "I can explain everything when I get back," he wrote to Jennifer. "This deployment will give us time to work through this. I love you, not Ashley." But Jennifer's responses suggested that the damage was irreversible. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore," she wrote. "How am I supposed to spend a year wondering what else you've lied about? How do I know you won't find someone else while you're deployed?" The situation at his mother's house was also deteriorating. Patricia sent Marcus increasingly frustrated messages about having to deal with Jennifer's emotional distress while he was unable to address the situation in person. "Your wife barely leaves her room," Patricia reported. "She's talking about moving back to her home state and filing for divorce. This is exactly the kind of drama I didn't want in my house." Marcus's attempts to manage the crisis through email were futile. He was scheduled to deploy within days, leaving him no opportunity to address the situation face-to-face with his wife or mother. His final emails before deployment were increasingly panicked. "Jennifer, please don't make any decisions while I'm gone," he pleaded. "We can work through this when I get back. Don't let Ashley destroy what we have." But Jennifer's response was clear. "Ashley didn't destroy anything, Marcus. You did that yourself by lying to both of us." The last message I saw in Marcus's inbox before his deployment was from his mother, and it was brutally honest about the consequences of his actions. "Marcus, I hope you understand what you've done," Patricia wrote. "Your wife is talking about leaving. I'm stuck dealing with the emotional aftermath of your lies, and you're going overseas for a year with no way to fix any of it. You created this mess, and now we all have to live with the consequences." Marcus deployed as scheduled, leaving behind a marriage in ruins, a furious mother, and a devastated wife who had learned the truth about her husband's character just months after their wedding. I never received any direct communication from Marcus after my initial "you're dead to me" message. He was apparently too busy trying to manage the crisis I'd created by exposing his lies. The satisfaction of seeing Marcus face the consequences of his deception was immense. For months, he'd manipulated both his wife and me, lying to maintain relationships with two women simultaneously. His deployment, which he'd probably seen as a convenient escape from having to choose between us, became a nightmare of trying to salvage a marriage he'd already destroyed. I never found out definitively whether Jennifer divorced Marcus, but based on the emails I saw, their marriage was unlikely to survive his year-long deployment. She'd discovered that her husband was capable of elaborate deception just months after their wedding, and that kind of betrayal is difficult to overcome. The irony was perfect. Marcus had used his upcoming deployment as a way to reconnect with me emotionally while maintaining his new marriage physically. But when his lies were exposed, the deployment became the worst possible timing, leaving him unable to repair the damage he'd caused. 6 months have passed since Marcus's deployment, and I've heard nothing further about him or his marriage. I've moved on completely from any romantic feelings I had for him, understanding now that the person I thought I was reconnecting with never really existed. The Marcus who called me and emailed me was just one of his personas, the devoted ex-boyfriend who regretted our breakup and wanted to try again. Meanwhile, he was also playing the role of loving new husband to Jennifer and dutiful son to Patricia. The experience taught me important lessons about trusting my instincts when something feels too good to be true. Marcus's sudden romantic pursuit had felt intense and genuine, but I should have questioned why someone would be so focused on an ex-girlfriend when he was supposed to be preparing for deployment and building a new life. I also learned about the importance of honesty in relationships. Marcus's deception didn't just hurt me, it devastated his new wife, who entered marriage believing she'd found an honest, committed partner. The revenge was particularly satisfying because it was entirely based on truth. I didn't have to exaggerate or fabricate anything. Marcus's own words, documented in emails and phone records, were damning enough to expose his betrayal completely. His mother's accusatory letter had been intended to shame me for interfering with his marriage, but it backfired by revealing information Marcus had kept hidden. The irony that Patricia's attempt to protect her son actually gave me the ammunition to expose him made the justice even sweeter. Today, I'm in a healthy relationship with someone who values honesty and communication. The experience with Marcus taught me to appreciate genuine transparency and to recognize the red flags of someone living a double life. As for Marcus, wherever he is in his deployment, I hope he learned that deception always catches up with you eventually. His attempt to maintain relationships with two women simultaneously cost him both relationships and destroyed the trust of his family. The evidence I mailed to his wife and mother became the foundation for consequences he couldn't escape, even from thousands of miles away. Sometimes the truth is the most powerful revenge of all. If you enjoyed this story of military deception exposed and justice served, please give this video a like and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of consequences. Share your own experiences with cheating partners in the comments below. Have you ever discovered someone was living a complete lie? Remember, when someone's story doesn't add up or they're avoiding certain topics, trust your instincts. The truth has a way of coming out, especially when there's evidence to back it up. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, deception might work temporarily, but honesty always wins in the end.